Okay, are we ready to decorate our bowling cookies? I'm ready. I'm ready. Let's do it. Okay. So we have our cookies ready to go. I put down some parchment paper on the surface here. That's what I like to do my decorating on. Parchment paper is basically baker's best friend. You use it when you're baking your cookies, you use it when you're rolling your dough out, you use it when you're decorating because it's easy to clean up. The cookies don't stick to it, nothing sticks to it, and it's white so it doesn't look strange and it doesn't have any fibers or anything like a cloth or I also have a couple of paper towels. I like to keep those on the side. They're nice for setting your icing bags on because if there's any icing that leaks out the tip, it'll just go onto the paper towel, easy to clean up. And I have my scribes here. These are little tools that you use for touch-ups, fixing things, swirling the icing around to get it nice on the edges. I will show you how I use them while we're decorating, but again, I got these on Amazon. They come in all different varieties, shapes, sizes, different looks. It's basically just your own preference what you want to use. You can also use a toothpick. That would work as well. These are nice though because they do have the handle that is easier to hold than a short little toothpick where you have less ability to hold it. But something is good. So have something ready, whether it's a scribe tool or a toothpick or whatever, have something. Okay. And finally, I have some nice sharp scissors that I'm going to use for carefully trimming off the tips of my icing bags. When you're trimming the tips off your icing bags, you can always go bigger, but obviously you can't go smaller. So start small, and then if you feel like it's too small and not enough icing is coming out, then you can trim it and make it a little bigger. I do that, and that's fine, not a problem. If you make it too big to start off with, then you're stuck with too much icing gushing out and not enough ability to control decorating your cookie, and that's unfortunate. Then you'd have to basically squeeze all of the icing out into a new bag if you wanted to fix it, and that's a real hassle. Nobody wants to deal with that. Okay, let's start with, what should we do first? The bowling pins or the bowling ball? I'm thinking let's start with a bowling ball. So what I'm going to need is the larger bag of red because this is going to be flooding our large bowling ball. So I'm going to cut a hole in the tip. Now I flatten it out. The bag has a seam on the ends, on the edges, so you just flatten it to the natural way that it flattens with the seams on each side. And that way you can just look really easily at the tip and just trim. I am going down, gosh, I don't even know. What would this measurement be? Maybe like a centimeter, 1/8 of an inch. I don't know. So I'm just going to trim this over here so I don't accidentally get the little plastic pieces on anything I'm decorating. All right, and when you do trim, you want to cut as straight across as possible. If you cut at an angle, the icing will come out wonky. So if you find your icing coming out wonky, it could be because you didn't cut straight enough, and then you can just fix it by carefully flattening it out again and trying one more time without cutting too much more off, just straight across the top. Well, let's see how that turned out. And then if I find that this is not a big enough hole, I'll come back and make it larger. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw the circle around the edge of the bowling ball, and then I will go in the middle and squeeze harder to do a thicker flood in the middle. But I'm going to squeeze very gently for the edge. And I am not holding the tip all the way down on the cookie. I'm holding it about 1/4 of an inch above the cookie and letting the icing fall down because you actually have more control over where it lands that way. Very gentle, almost no pressure on the bag at this point. Okay, so I've got my circle, and now I'm going to come in. I'm not going to go right up against the circle. I'm going to move in about like 1/4 of an inch from there, and I'm going to squeeze harder to do a thicker flood of icing all the way around to fill in the center. And then I'm going to come back with my scribe and swirl it out to get out to the edges. This is the best way that I can tell you to prevent your icing losing control and running off the edge of your cookie, is by just gradually getting it out there to the edges. So at this point, I didn't even draw my circle all the way to the edges. You can tell it's a little bit in from the outside. That gives me a little bit of flexibility in case the icing does decide to run out a little bit to the edge a little farther. I have some wiggle room there. Okay, now let's do interior flood. Now I'm squeezing pretty hard at this point to get the icing to come out as thick as I can because it's easier and faster to do it that way. All right, so that's nice. Now I'm gonna go just around the edge. I'm gonna squeeze a little bit less hard just to fill in that gap a little bit. Okay, now that gap is not completely filled in, so I'm gonna take my scribe at this point and I'm going to make circles, gentle circles, swirling the icing just to get it to touch that outer circle, because once it touches, they will meld together to form one solid surface and it'll be beautiful. There we go. Now I would like my bowling ball to be a little bit more rounded coming over here, so I'm going to just take my scribe. I'm going to do the same technique and I'm just going to push the icing farther over, farther out as I'm going around. Nice. And I might take it a little bit more out to cover closer to the edge of the cookie at this point. Just a little bit. Okay, this is good. I'm happy with this. Okay, and you can see now I'm gonna just wipe off the tip of my scribe so that it doesn't get dried off and messy up there. So I can kind of shake this, tap it a little bit to get that icing to completely smooth itself out. Now before that crusts over, I want to go ahead and add my little white accent that's going to give that sense of shine and depth. So I'm going to cut off just a teeny bit of the tip. Not much, just a tiny little hole. And I'm going to come in here. I'm going to do one. Did I cut off enough? I can squeeze it on my napkin to test it. Oh, I did. I cut off a little bit. All right, so I'm going to squeeze a little dot here, and then a little dot and a line. Curving that around a little bit. Okay. So now we have a little bit of a depth and shine. So we have a dot and a little curved white line there. And then we can come in with our black, and I can cut that hole a little bit larger than I did with the white. I'll do my 3 black holes. 1, 2, 3. Okay, now we're going to do the bowling pin the same way. So with our large white bag, I'm going to trim off the tip. And I'm going to trace around the bowling pin shape, not quite at the edge, just a little bit in from the edge. And again, I'm really putting almost no pressure on the bag at this point. I'm just kind of letting the icing come out all on its own. Okay, so we've got our border done, and now I'm going to come in and I'm going to squeeze the bag this time to get it to come out a little bit more thick. And I'm going to go around the inside. And you, instead of using a scribe, if you want to try, you can try using just the tip of your icing bag to kind of swirl that icing around and just make it touch the edges of your line where you've drawn it. If it does not touch the line, it might not ever touch the line. You know what I mean? It won't naturally move itself over there unless you make it. There, okay. So there is our white bowling pin. And now I'm going to take our red accent and I'm just going to trim a tiny little hole up on the end of that one. And we're going to draw some lines across our bowling pin. Okay, there's our red lines on the bowling pin. All right. So here we have our red bowling ball and bowling pin finished. I'm gonna set that over here to dry. Now this is a crusting buttercream, so if you let it sit out, I suggest overnight, the tops will crust over enough that you can package it up in a plastic bag, and I would not stack them on top of each other because they will get squished. It will still remain soft, but it should be crusted over enough that you could set them up like this, upright inside a box or a container.